Joining me now with more on this is the host of the Tony Katz Show, Tony Katz, along with journalist and New York Times bestselling author Chadwick Moore. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Tony, I'm going to start with you. Talk about NewsGuard, what you know.
What we know is that when we think for just a moment that America is supposed to be sharing information, getting information, that journalists are supposed to be actually engaged in journalism, that isn't the case. What we know is from going back to Twitter in the pre-Elon Musk days, we know that conversations for those of us who might not agree with the Jack Dorsey set weren't allowed to take place. And we know for sure that when you hired in places like the New York Times and the Washington Post and others, you didn't get to hire people who might think like you and me. You got people who only came out of the thinking of J schools. So even without this concept of NewsGuard, what you had was the slant. When you add in the experts, you add in this idea of the safeguards, it goes back to the old line of who watches the watchman. So to the extent that America knows NewsGuard at all, I don't think they know much about it at all. But when they hear about it from you, Bob, when they hear these conversations, I don't think they get surprised at how those who have been so desperate to push narrative, not news, which is, I think, a very honest conversation, have then brought in people to help them say, oh, yes, this is the right news to bring.
Chadwick, talk about that. And I've always wondered, well, I mean, I knew, but I think the general public, when you type into a Google search or what it might be, or, you get a certain set of stories, and it's always tilted one way. Why does that happen? There are people who are delivering that and creating the algo and whatnot, and then that's the result. To Tony's point, this has got to be an internal change or some different thought process introduced into these companies.
Yeah, it's absolutely intentional, and you can't really at this point pretend that it's not, particularly whenever there is some sort of issue. Like, remember when you tried to Google Trump's assassination attempt and nothing came up? You're getting things about assassination attempts from 100 years ago. And then, of course, whenever that happens, the instances are too many to count. Google or whoever comes back and says, oh, it was a glitch and we fixed it. Well, no, it wasn't. I'm sorry. It was intentional, because those glitches only go in one direction, always in the same direction, and always one that benefits the left and hurts the right. It's you can't even deny it at this point. There are such simple solutions that, for example, I don't use Google. Nobody should use Google. I use a different search engine, and they have, when you search something, they have two tabs at the top where you can click news from the right and news from the left. That's wonderful. You can see how the left is framing one story versus how the right. I don't know if that's the exact solution, but it shows that even startup browsers have very simple solutions to this problem. The point is, of course, that Google is an ideological organization, and they do want people to think in a certain way. And so they change the system for that. It's a massive abuse of Section 230, which is the only reason Google and other companies like Google are allowed to exist. Without 230, these companies go away overnight. It's an abuse of that because it's taking an editorial stance. They're not allowed to make any sort of editorial decision in terms of content. And if they do, they're publishers, they're not platforms, and their protections go away.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we got to leave it there. We're out of time. Tony, Chadwick, thanks for coming on.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yep.